Hello, welcome to episode 13 of the Snowboard Instructor Podcast. This week we talk to Jimmy and Noah, who are two incredible American snowboard instructors. We talk about stuff like how they started snowboarding, how the American ski resorts operate, as well as how the AASI system works compared to other instructor associations.
Alongside this, we have a sponsor for this episode. Watch and Ride is an online snowboarding school which focuses on improving your ability no matter what level you are. With loads of quick tutorials and feedback from high-level instructors, you're bound to improve not just your technical ability, but also your knowledge. They also have a fitness program to help maintain your fitness for next season of shredding. As we all know, lockdown has made us a bit lazy. Visit Watch and Ride and use the coupon code Snowboard Instructor Podcast for 25% off your order. We hope you enjoy this episode and have a great day. Cool. Right then. Let's just kind of go straight into it then. So because we've got you're right there, Noah. Do you want to go and grab?
Oh. No,
Oh man, I love the trousers.
Yeah, they're sick.
I forgot. I didn't have any
cool.
pants on. Just looks a little fussy there. That better?
Nice.
Solid.
Perfect.
Sorry.
He's OCD, but CDO.
It's just, you gotta have a good. There we go. That's better.
It's all right. We can hear you guys perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The microphone. Okay. Cool.
Great
I'm good now.
start.
I didn't do pants on.
Are you quite OCD in your snowboarding as well, mate, or is it just?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. It's, like, we've been doing this so long, and we have such a in place language to talk about it that it's hard to not ride and not think about what's going on with my snowboard. There's like we have this technical background, and I feel like I'm always have this heightened sense of awareness about what my body's doing and what effect that's having on the snowboard, and how that can change. So when I do something like skiing, God forbid, it's like a thrill because I have no idea what's going on, and I think about it. It's just like magic. So in that sense, yes, when I ride, there's probably almost a little too much OCD. Like there's a part of me that misses a little bit of the magic of not knowing what's happening with my body and with snowboarding. It's there sometimes, you take some soul laps, some powder turns, or work on some new tricks in the park and push myself. But yeah sure, you can say that. Yeah, OCD.
No, that's super interesting because we've had a previous conversation about this where me and Alec kind of started snowboarding around when we were like 17 to 18 years old. So we weren't that young. We already knew how our motor skills were and it was all developed there. So kind of starting snowboarding around that time, you're always thinking about it. But if you go to the European resorts, like let's say Switzerland, for example, usually like, of course it's mainly skier orientated in that sense, but those kind of like kids were born into that resort and born into like that sport, so it's like second nature to them on like skiing and snowboarding. You can kind of see that, and they just don't have to think about it because they've done it so long and they've done it so young when they started off. So we kind of envy that in that sense, where you see like people who have grown up with snowboarding, who have grown up with skiing, and they, you just see him, it's like second nature to them, and we're just like, oh mate, I wish I wasn't thinking about it as much.
You can get like sort of narrow-minded in that sort of sense,
yeah.
So if you're doing it one way for God knows how many years, any other way or another way of looking how to ride differently might just be weird or wrong to you, if that makes sense. What do you guys think?
We were just talking about that, actually, how we kind of get entrenched in certain movement patterns or routine behaviors, and they become so comfortable sometimes in routine that it can become challenging to expand from that, or to try something different, or to move in a different way.
Yeah, without a doubt. And so relating kind of back, I feel like I am maybe not OCD enough in my riding these days. I think there was a time when I was too OCD and just too fixated on doing this very exact, precise movement pattern to attain the desired outcome. And I would say after I finished my Cert 3, I really let go of a lot of that, and because I was just so stressed out and overwhelmed and kind of burned out on being so technical. And I really wanted to be more like those kids that you're talking about in Switzerland. And so I feel like I almost actively stopped thinking about everything. I had to convince myself to actively not think so much and just go and have some fun. If you're thinking too hard for too long, just don't think and have some fun. And now I'm training for our trainer cert, which is in our organization. I don't know every division, but it's a divisional certification about training people for passing the exams. And so every division might have a different name for it, different kind of some different things. I don't know much about theirs. I only know what I know so far about our divisions, the Rocky Mountain divisions. But now I'm training for this exam coming up in only 5 weeks or something like that. And I'm like, there ain't no way I'm going to pass this exam. And part of the reason is because I haven't had that technical focus in my riding for several years now. Since passing Cert 3, I really let that slip a lot, and it shows.
What are sort of the what's the word, like the criteria for that exam? Is there and the modules? So is there like a teaching exam or a technical exam? And then in that technical exam, what sort of the stuff you need to do to pass it, if that makes sense?
So there are, on all of our exams, level 1, 2, 3, and the trainer exam, the Rocky Mountain trainer exam, they all have a format, 3-day format. One of the days is about instruction or clinic leading, in the case of the trainer's exam. And then there's one day is about the riding. So they ask you to do specific riding tasks that are pertinent to the level of certification that you're taking that level. So let's say a Cert 1 is a certification to teach beginners. So all of your ride tasks on the riding day of the exam are pertinent to showing demos to beginner zone students, if that makes sense. And intermediate zone and then advanced zone. So the riding tasks get more difficult as you go up because it's showing advanced riders a specific movement pattern that you want them to learn. So there's an instruction day, a riding day, and a movement analysis day of the exam. So, and they sort of alter things from time to time as they see fit and as need be. So I don't have a really great grasp on the specifics of what they're doing now, let's say at the Cert 2 exam for movement analysis, because I took my Cert 2 10 years ago. So they may have changed some things since then, and I'm not sure what all the current ins and outs of the system are at this moment. But that's the sort of general format. There's a riding day, an instruction day, and a movement analysis day.
Great.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No, carry on with that, and then we'll kind of move on to something else in a second.
I was going to say that most of all of the exams at this point you can pass them piecemeal, meaning, so I will show up for this trainer's exam and the 1st of March for 3 days. And let's say I'm successful on my ride task day, but not successful on the clinic leading and the movement analysis. Next season, I will be able to come back and sit just for the movement analysis and instruction day, and I won't have to retake the riding portion. So you kind of pick things off as you go. And that's a recent change of the trainer's certification, and a not so recent change at the Cert level 3. I put my Cert 3 together piecemeal over several seasons.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so it's kind of just like bit by bit, you're just kind of implementing. Yeah, so it's similar to how kind of most high level qualification to do those like certain modules essentially. But yeah, I kind of want to go into you know, where you guys started off with snowboarding. So Noah, can you tell me, yeah, where you started to snowboard? Where did you begin to learn to snowboard?
Yeah, sure. I grew up mostly in West Texas, so the closest ski area is to, I don't know if you're familiar with Texas. It's dry, it's flat, dust, hot. You know, not exactly Wales. So New Mexico, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I took a snowboard lesson there. I think it was 1998, 1997. Yeah, and loved it. That was the thing to do in the 90s. You went snowboarding, and it was pretty awesome. And I could only go a couple times a year, living far away with parents who weren't exactly snow enthusiasts. So it was always my own effort to make it up to a ski area, and I had a great time. But I didn't really start doing it more than once or twice a season until I lived somewhere that was close to mountains. Seattle, Washington was that place. And as soon as I moved there, I had some friends that also snowboarded and started going around to different mountains and had a blast. I worked for a company that who the owners, they loved to ski, and they would go skiing all the time. And our kind of our holiday party that year was actually a trip up to Whistler. They paid for a condo for a few days, and you just had to make your way up there, cook one of the dinners. And I borrowed my friend's split board, actually, used it as a whole board, and kind of went off on my own one day. I was intermediate at best. I'd love to go back to Whistler now and actually ride the mountain than all the groomed intermediate runs.
Right.
But I remember going off on my own and being up the top. I think it was Whistler Mountain. I'm just thinking, oh my God, this is freaking awesome. Yeah. And I started formulating my plan to submit my resignation to the company and move to Colorado to become a lift operator. So I kind of embraced it fully. That was about 12, 13 years ago. And I moved to Breckenridge, and I didn't start teaching right away. I just took any job. It didn't matter. My goal was just to snowboard and do the Colorado ski bum thing. But I lived with two children's snowboard instructors that were pretty influential. One of which was from Australia. He had kind of been bouncing around from season to season back when we still offered H-2B visas to internationals, and he was teaching here. And he had his shit together. He had his whole plan. He had a folder with his visas and his passports. And he taught in South Australia in the wintertime, in the Southern Hemisphere winter, and he taught at all these different North American resorts from season to season. And I was really impressed with how organized he was. Because in my mind, the perception of being a snowboard instructor was still this ski bum mentality, something you do in between other things, right? The idea of it as a career hadn't entered my head yet. And I could see with him that he had, he was making it a career, and it was viable, and there's opportunities for advancement and making money. And, the conversations at the end of the day were much different. That they had some rad kids that they took on some cool terrain. I said hi to some guests as I got off the gondola, and I was content with my role, right? It served a means to an end, but I could see that I wanted to return the following season and try teaching teach snowboarding. So that's what I did, and
now you're still here trying teaching.
Still just different people. It's it's a little bit different setup, but I really had no reason to return to a quote unquote traditional lifestyle, traditional career. Go back to the full-time salary job, and I made enough money to get by and be comfortable. And I paired it up with this summer job out in California at a national park. And it was just really easy for me just to continue each season teaching snowboarding and getting better. And the certification program like AASI was pretty huge in providing some structure for growth, which was kind of an essential piece for me to be happy, as opposed to just doing a job, right? If there's no opportunities for growth for me, then it's not necessarily a very exciting venture. But by having this pathway that was really clear, and a really great training program at Breck that was free, that made it really easy for me to keep going and keep growing and keep getting better, and increase my wage. And so it was pretty easy for me to just stick with what I was doing. And here I am
How was that free training program in general? If you were able to kind of go into the details of that.
Yeah, sure. So at most of the larger resorts in North America, the resorts are able to set aside money to provide training for their instructors, either for new instructors obviously that come in and need to learn the craft, or for returning instructors that are continuing their education, developing their skill set, and preparing for certification. So at Breck, we're quite large, and so we have a pretty robust training program. We offer elective training from December through end of April, actually. And with a couple different kinds of focus, it could be you're trying to get your Cert 1, 2, 3, RMT, whatever, and you're training for that. It could just be you want to get better at your teaching, you want to get better at teaching a particular skill set, you want to get better at your writing, so there's writer improvement, teaching improvement, and certification are kind of the different avenues of training. But we offer them, full day clinics. They're a little abbreviated right now just for COVID's sake, but it's still one of the best benefits about being an instructor is you have access to these clinics, to training, to get better. So that's a huge win. At smaller resorts, they're a little bit more limited in the amount of money they can spend on it. So either they have people at the resort like James who do training, or they work with the Rocky Mountain Division to bring in educators from other resorts through a program that we have in place that's designed to serve the member schools and the membership. It's a really awesome program, actually. So that provides training to some of our smaller resorts that can't necessarily don't have the personnel maybe, or don't have as much money to spend on it.
Yeah, a lot of the smaller resorts don't have the appeal to more experienced and highly certified instructors. So when I first went to Monarch, this is my second season there. When I first applied and first spoke with the director, he was kind of like, what do you want to do here? What's going on? Why are you here? It was a really awkward conversation for me because it was my girlfriend and I mostly wanted to move away from all the hustle and bustle of the bigger ski areas and whatnot and be in the town of Salida. It's about half an hour away from the ski hill because Salida has kind of better opportunity for more and better year-round recreation opportunities. It's kind of better for mountain biking. It's better for rafting, which is our kind of summertime hobby. We're right next to the Arkansas River, Browns Canyon, which is one of the most popular rafting destinations in the United States, and it's in our backyard. So we wanted to come down here, kind of get away from the hustle and bustle and be closer to that. And I was like, well, I'm still going to apply to teach at the ski hill, obviously, but I don't think there's really business there to sustain somebody who's trying to really do it as a career. So it doesn't have the appeal for very experienced and highly certified instructors, which leaves them kind of struggling every season to figure out how they're going to make new hire training for their never ever instructors coming in, which means that then they're turning to PSAA and ASI to have an educator from them, such as Noah, come down to lead some training there. So it's been an interesting experience for me to go from being at a place like Breckenridge, where I was feeling like a normal sized fish in a giant ocean full of fish just like me, to coming to a little tiny goldfish bowl and a giant shark or something like that. Kind of a weird experience for me, but that I've been really enjoying. It's just been kind of interesting being in something completely different from the hustle and bustle of Breckenridge. Maybe that to scale, how many instructors do you have at Breckenridge?
Right now about 650, 675.
Jeez, really? Fucking hell. That's a shit. That's a lot, man.
What's the most?
Well, I mean, we're under normal circumstances, we'd have about 800.
Right, 800 or so instructors under normal circumstances. Yeah. COVID kind of restricted that a little bit. And at Monarch, we have something like 200 employees. That's mountain wide. That's food and beverage. That's the snowcat operators, it's lift operators, and instructors all included. So I don't know how many instructors we have exactly, but because I can only count to one anyway. That's why I'm a snowboarder.
So no, it being a Breckenridge with that many instructors, is it? Are they all working for the resort, or do you guys have like third party kind of companies?
No, the American system's a little bit different than Europe, right? America, the ski lift operators have a monopoly, like a permitted right to basically run a business on the land, and that excludes anybody else from running lessons or the stuff. There's some exceptions for some lines of work. That aren't offered by the resort. So, say for example, like competitive coaching, right? Breckenridge Ski and Snowboard School we don't have a competitive coaching program, so we allow third parties then to operate through a permitting process with their operation on the land. So no, it's all Breck employees, all Breck instructors.
That's very similar to how kind of Canada resorts operate, where it's all kind of that one resort. Are you? I know it's kind of different between different resorts and how they function. Are you guys pretty leeway with third party companies, or is it just like a no-go? Like, of course, like you're saying with the coaching courses, but I mean, just let's say a full ski school, like a small ski school, or even gap courses, for example, that like third-party companies do.
Yeah, it's kind of like, so the resorts, most of our resorts are on public land, on federal land, like national forest. So they pay the government and the people for a permitted use of that land. So it's kind of like an investment, right? They pay X amount of money to operate a ski resort. And in exchange, they have exclusive rights to operate as a business on that land. So it excludes anybody that the resort doesn't want or might present a conflict of interest. So essentially no third parties. The exception is like if, Jim James he has a client, he has some clients, right? He wants to teach a private lesson. Like he can contact Breckenridge and say, hey, I have some clients that I'd love to come teach at Breckenridge. May I come teach them on your property? They have to buy lift tickets and all that sort of thing. And so we kind of have this underlying like reciprocity agreement among resorts for like kind of one-offs for like, to go teach our clients at specific places, but it doesn't come with any like lift line cutting privileges or lift tickets. Come on your own, but it's kind of like a courtesy that we will allow with advance notice to teach in other places. It happens, on
rare occasion.
Yeah,
every now and again when I was working at Keystone or Breckenridge, I would see an Aspen instructor. Mm-hmm. And because it's Aspen ski instructor uniform or whatever. Yeah. And they're very obviously teaching that person how to ski or snowboard. On rare occasions, you'll see something like that going on. Or I've seen like steamboat instructors at Keystone. So every now and again, you see something like that. But it seems to be fairly infrequent, and maybe a more frequent thing that is kind of interesting. So Breckenridge is owned by a conglomerate of resorts called Vail Resorts. So there's Vail, Beaver Creek, Breckenridge.
You might have heard of them.
You might have heard of Vail.
Everyone knows of Vail.
It's a little company.
Little startup.
Right? So they own, at this point, their portfolio is like 20 something resorts. 37 different ski hills across the country. And so it's a little bit more streamlined if let's say we're an instructor at Breckenridge and I had clients that I wanted to ski with me at Keystone. It's just right over the hill. They're very close to one another, and it's very easy to facilitate something like that. So now I'm wearing a Breckenridge jacket at Keystone, but there isn't any it's not as strict or weird or sort of as like, say, showing up at Breckenridge and trying to get that advance notice to teach my Monarch clients at Breckenridge.
Okay, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, same company, same
between Monarch and Breckenridge.
Yeah,
because Vail have only recently just bought. It's been a couple of years ago. They've only recently just bought Whistler. We were speaking to Nev Lapwood about that, and he was talking about all the logistics and how Whistler operate and how they're kind of like a subsidiary now to like Vail and how they kind of work. So it's pretty interesting just seeing like Vail Resorts basically just become this big ass company that are just like own. Yeah. Do you reckon they're gonna like own pretty much half of the resorts at this point in America?
Well, I reckon you should buy stock. in Vail.
Good idea, actually. Yeah, I'll get on that straight away. Yeah.
No, it's pretty strategic. Their acquisition process, it's meant to diversify the geographic background. It's not really about like trying to buy all the resorts in Summit County. And honestly, as they acquired in the early days, they actually had to sell off like Arapahoe Basin is just another small resort in Summit County, and it part of another small group like Breckenridge and Keystone and A Basin were owned by the same small company.
Purina.
Ralston Purina. There's a dog food company.
They're owned by a dog food company.
But they had to spin off A Basin, so they didn't have a monopoly. So there's definitely like oversight for like geographical monopolies on ski resorts. But the plan is really about providing access to pass holders to different regions. So say the snow's shit in the East Coast, all those people can come out to Breckenridge or Vail or whatever. They come to Colorado and their pass still works. They have access. They can continue, their annual legacy of doing their family ski vacation. And it's a little bit more easy and streamlined. Same thing, vice versa.
Or they can go to Utah if the snow's good in Utah.
Canada, that sort of thing. So it's about kind of like networking different markets together so that there is some fluidity for those pass holders to be able to travel easily among the different resorts. The idea. So my guess is Europe is probably the next stop. They've kind of stayed out of Europe. The regulatory process
sort of connection.
Well, there's a pass sharing agreement with a couple of resorts.
Yeah, I was going to say, aren't they doing something like that already? I'm pretty sure Vail is meant to be looking at resorts in Europe to buy out and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It would be different in Europe, I imagine. It would be different laws and things.
Yeah, but the same thing in Canada as well. Like like that's. There's always like two sets of kind of laws on a large scale level about how they apply to the United States. Well, in Australia, so there's definitely some navigation.
Right. Yeah. So Vail did acquire a couple of 3 places or something. Down in Australia.
Perisher was the first, and then I think I
can't remember what the other 2 were called. So in theory, we could. Well, I'm not working for Vail Resorts any longer, but Noah could go and spend our summer, Southern Hemisphere winter, still working for Vail Resorts if he would like to.
I could.
Good. You could go ride in the rain.
I'm just gonna hang it on your raft. That sounds much better.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Jimmy, I kind of want to go back to your kind of beginnings and how you started snowboarding. And then we can kind of culminate all of that into talking you guys both about the qualifications after. Okay.
Well, I grew up in Atlanta, another hot, not snowy place. Not quite so dry as West Texas.
Moist.
Very moist there. Yeah. Moist, like a good cake. So we had snow very, very occasionally down there. It was always one of those like childhood things, like, wow, it's snowing, we had a snow day. But it was just so few and far between. Snow is not something I really grew up with. And I remember watching the 1994 Winter Olympics in Lillehammer, Norway, and seeing the ski racing to me was just the most stunning thing ever. And instantly I was like, I got to do that. This snow sports thing, that's for me. Whatever I got to do to figure that out. And so the next year I went skiing and I shattered my leg. So then that didn't work out that good. And then I went skiing a couple more times after that, and it just was really frightening. I kind of couldn't get through that mental barrier. And I had pretty lousy knees as well. So I went snowboarding. I took a lesson at Keystone when I guess I must have been 14 years old or so. And I took this lesson and I caught on really quickly. And it was instantly this amazing, yes, I can, and this is so fun kind of experience. So I had a 3-day trip out to Keystone that year. By the end of the trip, I was able to ride down groomed black terrain, so steeper, narrower groomed terrain. And then I came back the next year out to Colorado, actually to Monarch, where I'm currently working, and rode there. And then I didn't get out west for several years. There are a few small ski hills in North Carolina and West Virginia that I went to. And then I had a hiccup in college where I wasn't allowed to attend any classes for a semester because I had transferred schools or some weird thing happened. I can't remember all the details. So I was like, well, I'm not going to sit around in Atlanta doing nothing. So I got a job also as a lift operator at Keystone, and I got put in the employee housing, and my roommate was the ski school supervisor. And we would, Keystone has night skiing. So every night after work, we'd go ride together. And he was like, you ought to be an instructor. Like, drop this stupid lift operator gig and come be an instructor. And he was like, I need instructors. So it doesn't matter how bad you are, come work for me. So I switched over to ski school, and never looked back. I'm still doing it.
And that's when you guys did. When you did your level 1. Then
I think I did my level 1 on my 4th season. I put it off because I was still in college, and so my seasons were kind of short because I was coming out to Colorado for Christmas break and spring break or whatever. So I'd only work for a month of the season for a couple of those seasons. And so I wasn't sure if I was going to be a ski bum forever, kind of relating back to some of what Noah was saying, is kind of thinking this is just a gap year, fun thing to do, and then I'll go back to school or go get a real job or whatever. And then I just kind of didn't. I did eventually, and now I'm back again, sort of. I'm looking at trying to be full-time and maybe do the southern hemisphere transition. We'll see how it all goes.
Yeah, back-to-back winters I hear is just like killer, but it's super fun.
Yeah, I don't know if I could do that forever either, but the body needs a rest.
Yeah,
it'd be nice to get on the raft and do some rowing.
Yeah,
upper body workout for the summer, lower body workout for the winter.
Mate, you'll be buff as hell by the end of a couple of winters afterwards. I'll be like, whoa. We'll do like a re-podcast like in the next couple of years. And you'll just be like a Hulk. And be like,
you could just be a frail little twig of a person.
Yeah. No, what about you? When did you do your level 1?
Yeah, so I've been motivated right by the kind of the career Australian I lived with, Matthew Ronald. So I did my level 1 and 2 in the first season, kind of right off the bat, and I was definitely encouraged by my supervisor and one of my training managers at the time. It was awesome. And I never thought, like, when I started teaching that I would go beyond 2. I was like, cert 2, that's a good place to be. I'll just kind of hang out there for a little bit, Hey, I'd commit, a reasonable amount of effort to put into it. Like, I learned a lot, but I didn't think I would go past that. And, pretty quickly after completing my 2, I realized that I should just keep going. That's kind of the cool thing about having a really clear, visible pathway for development, is that it's easy to kind of like decide for yourself to go a little bit farther, take the next step. The next year, my second season, we have a children's specialist accreditation in ASI. So I did that. And at that point, I was actually eligible to participate in kind of a training development program at Breck.
Cool.
It's different now, but I essentially became a trainer kind of at the beginning of my 3rd season and in my 2nd season, which was, I had not even like conceived of that when I started to teach. I didn't, I was just going to hang out with kids and slide on my snowboard. And so that was kind of like a big game changer for me. I think it really opened up my eyes about education on a broader level, more than just teaching people snowboarding skills and, maybe some life skills. Sure. It was about education and helping, learning how to teach people how to teach, and learning how to learn, really. I've been to college, and then college is great and fun, but it didn't help me with like sports performance and like my being aware of like my mental state as I learned a motor skill, and like I know there's just so much that goes into how we teach and what we teach that's inextricably linked to how we learn and how we learn to learn, because I think that's an evolutional process as well, as we stick around doing this for longer. So that was kind of my path, and I started, Cert 3, and I enjoyed the Cert 3 process here. It took me, I think, 2.5 years, and I think most people are pretty stoked to finish their Cert 3 and we have these gold pins. You get the gold pin, right? And on. I was a little disappointed. I got the cert 3 and I was like, what do I do now? So I kind of knew that I just, it was inevitable for me to keep going. Like, I mentioned before that growth opportunity that exists in snowboard instruction, snowboard education, that's really huge for me. And I'm still, very much a part of it. That's definitely one of the driving forces for my enjoyment of being in this industry. More than just actually snowboarding on my snowboard. Like, I enjoy the learning and the teaching immensely. So that's kind of been the pathway I've on.
That sounds great. And Jimmy, what about you? Where did you do your level 2? And then, of course, evidently that level 3.
So my process has been maybe in some ways rockier than the way that Noah made his experience sound. It wasn't challenging by any means. The transition from Cert 1 to Cert 2 for me was very, very, very challenging in the riding. Making the change in the movement pattern that they're looking for was something that it took me several seasons to feel like I could do it at all, let alone at the standard they're looking for at the exam. And so when I passed my Cert 2, it was like this huge sigh of relief that I passed the riding portion. So I was like, there's no way that I am going to pass this exam. And I did, but I felt like it was a miracle.
Can we let's kind of go into the details then? Like, what did you feel like you needed to improve on? Where did you feel like you were kind of strong at it as the beginning with that technical ability?
So, I've always been a natural teacher. That's my personality. I've always been that way. Even when I was a little kid, my mom tells stories about when I was a little kid, helping people out, trying to teach them whatever thing was going on. And so that part was easily my strong suit. I didn't feel like I had to put in anywhere near as much effort at Cert 2 for the instruction day as I did for the riding day. And the big change in the riding, you had said that you wanted to go into some of the technical aspects of that. So all of our beginner zone stuff, Cert 1 riding tasks, involve a most extended at edge change movement pattern. So you're kind of flexed down during the turn, and then you stand up a little taller to get the board flat, and then kind of settle back down into a more flexed position as you go through the turn.
Open weighted.
Yeah, open weighted, as you call them your way. What's the word do you call? Because over here we call them like crossover turns. So like high crossover turns or low crossover turns. What? Unweighted or
unweighted?
A terminology that we steered away from several years ago now, but and I think really the reason why we steered away from it in our organization is that we felt we could describe what's actually happening better than those terms allow you to, if that makes sense. So rather than talking about the center of mass moving over the snowboard, kind of talking more about kind of a more broad and more in-depth variation of that, if that makes sense. And by being able to, I don't know, to me, so we'll go to the change and then we'll come back to this. So from Cert 1, you have these extended at edge change turns, which you may call crossover turns, where the center of mass is crossing over the snowboard to change edges. But what's making that happen in our organization, we talk about that's happening because of that extension in the legs to remove the pressure off of the snowboard, to unweight the snowboard. So then for a while we went to an up unweighted versus down unweighted language around it. So at Cert 2, they want to see flexed at edge change turns. And then at Cert 3, they want to see flexed at edge change with retraction turns.
Yeah.
And I think that the up or the crossover cross under leaves out the flexed at edge change turns. To me, a cross under turn really relies more on the retraction bit, which is at the Cert 3. And so to jump straight from an extended at edge change turn to a flexed edge change with retraction is too big of a jump, and it leaves out that whole intermediate zone. That's kind of my take on it. It's my understanding of the content. Noah probably has something to say about that.
Yeah.
Maybe either correct me or corroborate with what I'm saying.
No, it's supposed to. I think it's just a little bit more articulated and specific about what the body movement is versus what the visual interpretation of the body movement is. Right, crossover and cross under. You can be achieved without maybe the vertical movement that we're hoping to see at those particular certification levels. So I think it was just really about trying to articulate the exact like movement pattern.
It's definitely super interesting in terms of hearing like this type of terminology. There's always been like a variable debate in what's what and what's a cross under, or like say what's down under way two, and there's people saying no it's this, and it's just kind of like that back and forth debate, and it's quite interesting to see how people kind of think of it. It's kind of just got lost in this like mess of what we all think it is in our own individual heads, instead of like that's just like one uniformed way. It's super interesting that way.
I'm still kind of confused on half the time what people are on about. I'm just like, what do you mean by that? That could be like 20 different things.
And there's a lot of effort on in our organization about clarifying some language, and every year they release some more kind of changes and whatnot, and really it's focused around, I think, clarifying a lot of the language so that we can more accurately and concisely describe what we see going on, and because it kind of limits the space for a never-ending argument that never goes anywhere, arguing about is it cross under or crossover, high cross under or whatever. We can just garbage. We can just trash that whole lingo and then accurately describe what we're seeing going on, and it doesn't need this kind of umbrella term that maybe is a little bit too vague. If that makes sense.
Yeah. It's just funny.
We've been going.
Yeah, it's definitely just funny hearing all this, because when it comes down to it, really, you're not really going to use that lingo with like someone who's just learning it as first client, and it's
no, of course not.
Like,
imagine if you do though. You're doing that.
We're clearly only using this lingo to make us feel better at snowboarding and know what we're on about.
Well, I mean, I definitely feel that as well, right? But I think this kind of thing, this excessively technical jargon and discussion, is present in any field, right? So I think that you can, and I think that there's a place where you kind of curtail that. You don't use all that lingo for who you're presenting to necessarily, because we're presenting for a specific audience, right? So when I talk to my girlfriend about all this stuff, I throw all the lingo out, right? Because otherwise, and I say like really generic, vague kind of things, and maybe I use the word squish a lot, right? You want to squish your legs down when you do the turn or whatever, something really kind of vague. Because our students aren't trained the way that we are, and they don't need to be trained the way that we are unless their intention is to also be an instructor. So if you go to college and you take a chemistry class, the chemistry class is taught by somebody who has, let's say, a PhD, a doctorate in chemistry, but they're teaching chemistry 101. You don't think they're dumbing it down for you? Of course they are. Right. And so it's present in any field where there's infinitely more technical ways to explain things and understand things that the expert in the room knows and has in their back pocket, but they're trying to select terminology and ways of explaining things to somebody that doesn't have that strength of knowing all the ins and outs and details. So the language is there for us to be able to accurately describe what we see going on and to enable us to really study the sport, right? So it's not just for us to feel good about ourselves necessarily, although it does do that. But it gives us a platform to have a discussion to figure out what's going on so that we can know our sport better every day. And hopefully we won't bring that into our classes because the student's never going to understand that jargon. Then we have to teach them the whole language before we teach them how to snowboard.
No, I fully agree. Like, I love geeking out in terms of using all those terminology.
Right.
It's super fun when you get to like talk to someone who knows all the terminology and the jargon. You can really geek out about it, and just like, you basically, if on the outside it's like you're speaking a second language to someone. Right. It's super interesting in that way. I kind of want to just quickly move back into the previous question, if that's all right, Jimmy. About the idea of the improvements that you kind of struggled with, or like what you felt like that you kind of needed to kind of go back on with that level 2.
So the transition for me from that extended at edge change movement pattern to a flexed edge change movement pattern was very, very challenging for me. I mentioned that my knees aren't very good, so that was really physically challenging for me to have the strength that I needed through the range of motion to actually like squat down at edge change and then be able to stand back up and be able to keep everything in my legs tight enough to squat down and not lose my balance altogether and fall over. That was really, really painful and really, really challenging for me to accomplish. But it did kind of set in motion. I think I was less cognizant of what was happening. I was less cognizant of my personal development as an individual, as well as within the sport and within my ability to teach this stuff and talk about this stuff. I think I was much less cognizant than Noah was during the process. I didn't feel so much when it happened that it started this snowball rolling down the hill. But once I got that Cert 2, I was like, hell yeah, like I know how to snowboard, I got this. And it really paved the way for me to be physically capable of getting my Cert 3, because adding that retraction to that move for me wasn't anywhere near as big of a challenge. Some of the stuff at Cert 3 is definitely harder, but for me, I didn't feel like it was maybe as big of a jump, but I think also I was just set in motion really well by my trainer for Cert 2, that it was just inevitably going to occur. So while I struggled at the Cert 2 exam, I did pass, and that gave me a confidence boost, but also the training to pass set me going towards Cert 3 sort of naturally. And similar to Noah, I was like, this is good. I don't really need to go for Cert 3. I don't really care. And then I kind of fell into motivation at Breckenridge by the sort of the culture there's really likes to push the certification pathway. And so I felt compelled. So I went for it. It was a 5-year process for me to finish all parts of the Cert 3. And now I'm back at it again for this trainer exam.
So let's move on to the trainer exam. Like, how are you finding that so far in terms of the progression of doing all the criteria and how it's all involved? And just kind of going from there.
So I'm really, really enjoying the process, to be perfectly honest with you. I'll take a step back. So at Cert 3, the riding is challenging for sure, undeniably. But also I feel like the riding in all the exams is a little bit boxed in because its purpose is more for demonstration purposes. And so, of course I might make use of being able to do a short radius skidded, flexed at edge change with retraction, turn using upper and lower body separation. Yeah, I might use that turn, but I'm not going to do a string of, in my personal riding, I'm not going to do a string of turns like that down the run, because to me, that's boring. Right? So I might use that turn, but not every turn. Sometimes I'm going to do something radically different than that, because I'm going to do the turn that's the most fun to me right now. That's the way that I ride. Now, I want all those brush strokes of all those different technical foundations that I learned through my certification process, because it means that I have those available to me. And one of them might be the most fun way to manage this terrain at this very instant. And so I appreciate all those kinds of things, but I find the riding portions of the exams a little bit square, because I don't like to ride that way in my own personal riding. I feel like it limits my creativity. But I understand its purpose, and I understand my job role of teaching people how to snowboard, and that you need that sort of structure to get anything done. I get it. but I'm kind of like, whatever. But the instruction portion, so at my Cert 3, it's fun because you do some wild stuff. I remember they made us do large radius closed carved turns, flex with traction and separation in a double diamond moguls run. So now you're going like 40 miles an hour across the moguls with your knees in your throat every bump, absorbing the bumps. And I'm like, this is nuts. Like, what are we doing here? You know, that's fun, but probably not going to do that on my day off. You know what I mean? So, so at the instruction portion was the last portion that I finished for my Cert 3, and I had a blast preparing for it, writing different progressions surrounding different concepts and whatnot, and kind of applying them to the terrain differently. I had a blast doing that. And then when I got to deliver my teach, which finally passed, I had an awesome time, and I was very cognizant of what I was doing while I was doing it, which was really, really fun for me. And so I guess largely in my efforts to be a trainer, which is somewhat pushed on me by Monarch Resort, which I appreciate. I appreciate the opportunity, is trying to create a fun learning environment where I get to be cognizant of what I'm doing and why, and know that it's working and know that it's effective, and that it's fun for me to be delivering the content, not just fun for the participants to be experiencing the learning situation that I've set up for them. So looking at all the different ways that this can be viewed, Noah and I were talking at length about this last night, and he was opening my mind to a lot of the different sort of finer details, maybe you'd say, about how to set this kind of thing up. And for me, that's been really, really fun. And to be able to kind of, I think the other piece is that Cert 3, the teach is a little bit, I don't know what the right word is, maybe contrived, in that it's very unlikely that you're going to be teaching a student at that level. You just never see that. I mean, every once in a while, every once in a blue moon, you know, I had a kid one time several years ago when I was teaching at Breck who could air out of the super pipe. So like it happens, but that happened once. And what happened 100 times throughout the season is I had a group of 10 first timers. So I didn't feel like a lot of the stuff that you have to put together to pass your Cert 3 is as directly pertinent to your job. But at the training exam, it is exactly that. This is what you should be presenting to your instructors at your resort to make them better instructors. And I get to have all the fun and silliness and put together these learning environments. And so to me, it's like a perfect avenue for me to have a lot of fun with my knowledge base, that I get to be a part of the fun as well, as opposed to being like, I got to put together this material for these other people. Why can't they already know it, or whatever? Or this is a waste of time because you're never going to use it. I'm like writing all these different clinic outlines for different topics that are pertinent to what we do every day. And later on today, when I make it up to Monarch Mountain, if I accidentally run into my boss and he's like, hey, can you do a training clinic? I'll be like, yes. Which one do you want me to perform for the group to better their skills in whichever vein that they see fit? And so to me, it's more directly pertinent to what my job is and what we do every day on snow with our guests. I'm really enjoying that sort of process, because it's like the fun that I got to have at Cert 3, except for it's more real, more concrete, and more direct to what we do. So I've been really, really enjoying the preparing for the instruction segment. At the riding portion, I'm like, like I get it. I know why we're doing this, but do we have to? And then at the movement analysis, I understand it, and I just I feel like that's kind of my weakest point is in the process, is movement analysis, and I think part of that is maybe it's my weak point relative to the standard they're looking for at the exam. It's not necessarily my weak point in real life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's such a interesting kind of topic regarding training itself and how all the little things intertwine with each other. I mean, it's definitely just, I think we all wish you the best of luck on that for sure, Jimmy.
Thank you.
But to be fair, you're going to have to message me 5 weeks from now telling me how you got, because I'll be anticipating that message for sure. Definitely. So Noah, how did you find your training exam? I know we kind of briefly touched upon it already, but yeah, kind of just going into a bit more detail regarding that, if that's all right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what specifically my kind of path to becoming a trainer, or?
Just the exam in general, and how you found that, like where you found improvements and whatnot, yeah.
Yeah, super fun. Well, the Rocky Mountain training program offered by the division here has kind of evolved over the years. When I first started teaching, the perception of it was kind of like this Cert 4, right? It's like demonstrating skills both in the writing and the MA and even at the teaching level that were beyond Cert 3. And that actually drove a fair bit of talent away from becoming staff educators with the division because it was seen as this assessment that was not really relative, right, to what we do as educators or as trainers.
I saw it that way.
Yeah, for sure. And so now it's actually evolved. It's been in the last, I'd say like 4 or 5 years to be being guided by what we actually do on the snow as trainers, right? So take the riding portion, for example. Before, you might be asked to go down some ridiculously like challenging, rocky, bumpy, steep terrain switch, with your eyes closed. Like, it's hyperbole, obviously, but it was like something that was like, show us that you've got hot feet and you're great on your snowboard, but does this tie back into what you're actually going to do as a trainer? No, not really, right? It shows that your ability to maybe impress somebody with your skill set, but that's not really a principal part of being an educator is. It's about being able to connect and demonstrate things that are relative to their writing in the day, not necessarily to the pinnacle of your writing. So now that looks like, show us, it's kind of running through Cert 1, 2, 3, showing your ability to demonstrate the movement patterns and the skills that you might be asked to train somebody else on, and show your ability to switch between those pretty quickly, like do 3 turns that are the Cert 1 turns and do 3 turns that are Cert 2 turns, etc. So that shifted a little bit. And then, the clinic leading has like largely remained the same. It's developed a little bit. Well, my experience was great. I enjoyed it for a reason beyond examination, because I think even at Cert 3 and at the RMT level, for me, it was I saw it as an educational experience more than an assessment experience. Yes, there was some examining going on and I would just receive a scorecard. We'd have a chat at the end of the day. And, either way, I'd have a beer, whether I was celebrating or commiserating. So it was okay. And I was kind of, it's, the benefit of it is that I got to also participate with peers at my own level. As you kind of move through the certification ranks, right? 1, 2, 3. There's less people at that level, right? Cert 1, you enter as a new instructor to resort, and you've got, I have 5 people in my training group, and I'm, friends with several of them still today. And our cohort, so to speak, was large, and that was comforting. But as you move to Cert 2 and Cert 3, there's less people that pursue those avenues of certification. So the exam at Cert 3 was kind of one of my few opportunities to not only demonstrate my skill set, but also see other people teach and ride at that same level. So in the spirit of like continuing education, it was a great opportunity for me to learn while also being assessed, and even more so at the RMT. Like I loved RMT exam because I got to not only like lead a 30-minute clinic of my choice, but I also got to be a participant in 5 other really awesome clinics that were presented by other high-level riders throughout the division. So I actually really enjoyed it. I did the RMT exam 3 times. At that point in time, it was like an all or none pass-fail situation. You had to pass all 3 components, or you had to retake all 3 components next, in your next go. So again, it was almost a moment of disappointment after I finished. Like, I finally got it. But now for me to participate in that level of education and to expose myself to ideals and concepts at that level, I have to, like lead an RMT training or participate in some, other kind of avenue. It's not as clear cut. Once you kind of get past that level, it's not, you have to really seek and try to be a part of some educational experiences, like, coming and hanging out here with James and us nerding out till midnight last night. That's my new avenue now. You have to kind of create it for yourself. And obviously the writing's fun. I pushed myself. Like, I would say that my expertise was less so in the freestyle realm when I started snowboarding. But I definitely pushed myself because that was a component, right? That's part of snowboarding, riding in the airing out of the super pipe. We had to do it. It's a little bit different now. But 5-6 years ago, that was definitely a part of this how we interpreted the national standard in the Rocky Mountain division. And I became a great pipe writer. I used to be terrified of that thing. And then I spent a whole season just writing pipe, and I love it. It's so much fun. So the process has pushed me to be more well-rounded in how I ride, more than just trees and bumps and cliffs and stuff, which was my first love. And I appreciated that part of the experience. And then I was able to bring skill sets from one application back into what I enjoyed doing the most. Well, I had a mostly positive experience, but I think, I was able to put myself in a mindset moving into it that was less attached to the outcome. The outcome for me was the experience. And it was, pretty rad to get, a certificate or a pin at the end of it. But I also was pretty pleased just to get some feedback on my performance and learn and network and meet some other, riders from throughout the division. That was pretty cool for me. But it has changed a little bit to be a little bit more attainable and be a little bit more representative of what one would do with that accreditation afterwards. And it's much different, unlike Cert 1, 2, and 3, which have a national standard that's interpreted by each division and assessed in their own way. There's really no national standard for a trainer accreditation. That's up to each division. I don't anticipate that actually, like a national standard being created. So the way in which you might become a trainer, receive a trainer's accreditation in the Western Division or the Eastern Division is much different than what it's like in Rocky Mountain. Some divisions are quite small. We have like Northern Rocky Mountain and Northern Intermountain. They probably have maybe a dozen resorts as member schools. And so, honestly, some of their trainer accreditation is really like, hey, come tag along to this event and, do some on-the-job training and we'll talk about it afterwards. And when you feel ready, we'll put you out there. It's a much different experience than training at your home resort where you have resources, experiences, and opportunities to develop your training skill set. And then you come show that at an RMT exam. It's a little bit different from division to division. So I think we're quite fortunate, James and I, to be in the Rocky Mountain division. We have probably, I would say, the most structured program to develop a training skill set and then receive an accreditation that allows you to do some cool stuff. Yeah.
Hey, that's sick. And I kind of want to last question really on the American Association and specifically your division. Where do you guys find the future of your specific division? Is there stuff you like to see that just overall the association will want to improve on? Where do you really think the association and your division is going in like the next 5 years, for example?
That's really hard for me to say on account of I'm a little bit more of an outsider on it, but having I'm not an examiner. I'm not on the ed staff or anything like that. In order to have that job, you have to finish the trainer's exam first. So it's harder for me to speak to that. But I can say from my experience on the receiving end of that education, I think that they're moving in a really good direction that I approve of, which isn't something that I saw myself saying, say, 5 years ago. And I think that the change there is in that relatability of making the exam process more directly related to what we do at our jobs. And so like to me specifically, what I would like to see, I guess, is a stronger emphasis on teaching skill and movement analysis skill, and in many ways, a decreased emphasis on the technical prowess of your riding, because that's rarely if ever applicable to what you do on the day to day. So to me, it's kind of like, to me, it's ridiculous that they ask at Cert 3 for me to be able to air out of the half pipe. Is airing out of the half pipe really fun? Do I want to do it? You bet your ass I want to do that. Of course, that sounds awesome. Let's go right now. However, that's not what happens most of the time at work. And so I think that developing that skill is less applicable to our everyday job. And then they have a freestyle track as well. So if you want to be teaching people in the half pipe on the regular basis or whatever, then you should go and do your freestyle level 1, 2, or 3 certification to do that, and kind of isolate it out from the rest of the exam. Of course, freestyle is ingrained in snowboarding, and so there should be, I think, still some freestyle component to the regular exam process, but I think the emphasis on it can be decreased, in my opinion. And then I think that some of those changes have taken place, like what Noah was saying, that the RMT process used to be ride switch down this gnarly, rocky, cliffy zone or whatever to prove that you're badass enough to become a trainer, when that's just really not applicable to what you're doing as a trainer. And so they have reeled that in. And now the focus is, do you have mastery over the movement patterns that you need people to be doing in order to pass the Cert 1, 2, and 3 exam, such that you can just change between the movement patterns on the fly, which is why they'll ask you to do 4 Cert 1 turns, followed immediately by 4 Cert 2 turns, followed by 4 Cert 3 turns. Do you have that level of mastery over the skill set? And I think that's fair. So I think, some things that I would like to see is a decreased emphasis on the half pipe specifically, because most mountains don't have one. So it's like, how are you going to develop a skill set on a terrain feature that is really dependent on having that terrain feature to practice on, especially at that high of a level of airing out of a super pipe? You need to practice in a super pipe. That's the only way to do that, in my opinion. To be able to be like on the wall, like above the transition, that doesn't require a half pipe to learn that. You can do that. If you're a good enough rider, you can do that in a day. You can do that this run. But airing out of the half pipe, that requires practice in the half pipe. And so if you work at a mountain that doesn't have a half pipe, which is most mountains, then I don't think that that's appropriate to have as a standard for that exam, if that makes sense.
No, that definitely makes sense. No, what do you think?
You get stronger emphasis on the teaching and the movement analysis, because there's a lot more there, a lot more content.
Makes sense, yeah. Noah, what do you think on the idea of the future of AASI and your division itself?
Yeah, so there's a few things happening. So on the national level, our standards have not really been remade, but they've been kind of restructured in a strategic way. Those will be released within the year. They're kind of out now. So there will be kind of a shift in making sure that the process that we use to assess using these standards and assessment criteria and different activities and stuff is aligned with this new guiding document. We'll call them new standards just to make it easy. So that's in the pipeline, and so we'll be kind of shifting to that from this season to the next. One of the other initiatives that's been taking place in Rocky Mountain is an effort to create more consistency in the member experience at an exam. So historically, you've had kind of like one examiner, assessing your performance, and one examiner might see something different or see something differently than another examiner, right? There's been, and that kind of creates this reputation about, oh, you had X person, good luck, or you got this guy, like, oh, sweet, like I'm looking good, right? The different ideas about how people assess. So in an effort to make it more consistent, we've introduced paired examining. It's already been in place on the Alpine side for quite a while, but we've been able to introduce it on the snowboard side. So for Cert 3 and Cert 2, that means you've got 2 examiners, and that produces a couple different outcomes, right? It creates more of a balanced point of observation on our performance as members or as exam candidates, and it makes it a little bit more consistent, right? And obviously it's not the same 2 examiners each time. So over the course of a few years, right, each examiner will theoretically have had a chance to assess and talk about what they see with other people, other members of the ed staff. So it also creates some accountability among the ed staff members, right? So as opposed to having this like kind of like fall training where we maybe talk about what a passing score looks like and what a passing score doesn't look like, et cetera. Now it's like on the snow and we can like sit there and talk and be like, oh, I saw this there. Did you see that? Great. We're looking at the same thing. Like, because there is a national standard, but again, each division is allowed to interpret or assess it in their own way. So it does create a little bit of inconsistency, and that's really, it's kind of almost like this federalist approach to divisions, right? Because the divisions existed before the national organization. So there's a little bit of like, there's a dynamic between the national standards in the organization and the divisions, right? They want their own independence and liberty, but with the benefits of being part of a national organization as well. So there's a big push right now in Rocky to create a more consistent experience for our members that promotes fairness, right? And egalitarian, like an equality experience. So that's happening right now. No other really big shifts. We had a conversation last night about how Rocky Mountain is fairly responsive to feedback from its membership. And there's a strong willingness for us to adapt and change, which is cool because it's it's an organization that's made up of educators. And, I believe that as you become more well-versed in your craft as an educator, so does too your ability to continue to flex and learn for yourself. And I think that's pretty unique among organizations that we've worked for. You can think about any other line of work, and there's maybe not as much a willingness to adapt and change and be willing to reflect upon the quality of your work. First and foremost, the organization does serve its members and its member schools. And so we are rather beholden to the requests that are made by its members and its member schools. And it's I'm definitely proud to work for the organization. It's definitely one of the best arrangements I've had in my life. And I think we will continue to evolve as our members need us to evolve in the member school. So long-winded response.
That's cool.
That's great. I want to move on to your mountains, your resorts, guys, and really talk about the communities in like Keystone, Monarch, and Breckenridge, and really just go in depth in terms of how different they are, but also how similar they are as well. Take it away, Jimmy.
So it's interesting to think about some of this stuff, and it's stuff that I've thought about for a really long time. I think that both Keystone and Breckenridge, which I'll focus on those two because I spent the most time there. And, I learned how to snowboard. My very first time on a snowboard was at Keystone, and obviously a very life-changing experience for me. So I feel like Keystone is like a freerider's dream mountain, just full of rollers and side hits. And it has a pretty, pretty reputable mountain bike park in the summertime. And so if you know where to go, you can go in the trees and hit summertime downhill mountain bike features on your snowboard. And there's some of the craziest feet. There's a like wooden slat bridge corkscrew that you can ride down on snow. Yeah, like gnarly, crazy stuff. And if you mess this one up, you will be in the hospital. It's up. And it's a lot of fun, right? And it's right there. If you know where to look, you can see it from the chairlift. It's right there, but nobody knows about it. They're just casually going down the groomer, and I'm like popping into the trees to hit that cliff or whatever. And at the time when I first started at Keystone, it was much more, much less tame. So all of it was open, and you could just go wherever. And there was no real restriction to that kind of thing. now they've kind of roped off some things, and I feel like every time I go there, they're stopping me from hitting my like locals only spot. So it gets frustrating. But I think that kind of terrain over the years has sort of bred a certain type of rider who then doesn't find enjoyment at Breckenridge, because Breckenridge has always been, in my opinion, they are more on top of grooming out those side hits on the edge of the groomed runs. And then they put like big signs that say no jumping on all the rollers. And I'm like, why are you taking away the best feature to learn how to jump on? Like, why don't you tell the people not to stop below instead of telling the people not to jump from above? And the mountain has just kind of always felt that way to me, but it has a lot of relatively easy or even lift access above tree line, high alpine, steep, double diamond, rocky kind of terrain that Keystone doesn't really offer. They have very little bit of that kind of terrain, and it's kind of long, treacherous hikes to get there with like terrible egress in comparison to Breckenridge. So at Breckenridge, I feel like you see a lot more people that are like Breckenridge people are like, let's go ride down the bowl kind of thing. Let's go launch that cliff kind of thing. And Keystone riders are like, let's go really fast and pop this roller or spin off of the little side hit back onto the trail and that kind of thing. And so when I left Keystone and went to Breckenridge, I felt this sort of clash because all the Breckenridge people are kind of anti-Keystone, Keystone sucks mentality, Breck's where it's at. But I was coming from this sort of free rider dream mountain, like looking for that in a different place. And so there was this sort of conflict that occurred. And I remember even having conversations where people would be like, oh, I see you're not on the schedule tomorrow. What are you going to do? And I would be like, I'm going to go ride a real mountain like Keystone, and just start talking smack as well. Cause they're talking smack on Keystone. I'm going to talk smack on Breck, even though I work there. And so I feel like there's this sort of conflict and I think it's really just what kind of skill set and what kind of vision of snowboarding you are introduced to has a sort of longer trajectory than we're usually aware of. And so you end up with Keystone people and Breckenridge people and not that much crossover. That could have changed, I think, in more recent years. But I see a big difference between the type of rider that you see coming out of each of those mountains. Which I find really, really interesting. So, as far as like snowboarding culture in and of itself, that's what I see. And then as far as like community, that also changed dramatically over time with changes in management and people come and go and move on to different things in their life. And so at Keystone, I kind of left because it just got too pretty. They kept putting in a new sign or a new lift or a new fence or whatever, and roping off my gnarly terrain that I want to go hit, and just kind of doing stuff like that to try to cater towards the ideal guest according to resort management, right? As opposed to catering towards locals. But when I started, Keystone was a small population of employees, very kind of locals, hidden gems kind of mountain. Follow me if you want to see the good stuff or whatever. You're not going to see it on the trail map kind of place. And Breckenridge was definitely a kind of ahead of Keystone in that progression, although now they may have kind of matched up in being just too catered towards your average guest. For my taste personally, like I don't want to go skiing at Disneyland. And I feel like both mountains have kind of gone too much in that direction for my own personal taste. And then we had like a really, when things were cool at Keystone, we had a really like consistent group season to season. I mean, there was some rollover, some turnover and whatnot, but there's a handful of people that were back every year for 10 years running. And some of those people are still around today, and they're some of my closest friends. But it just became less and less of it became less and less apparent to people to be able to be career professionals in this. And they're just like one season gap year, moving on kind of thing. And that happened, I think, at both mountains. So when I left Keystone and went to Breck, it was very obviously a return staff kind of collection that I was pooled with at my base area and whatnot. The people that had been doing the same thing at the same place for so many years and were really good at their jobs and really passionate about it. And I felt really good about that. I didn't love the mountain yet because I didn't know it very well, but I liked who I was working with and that everybody was passionate and dedicated and experienced. And I felt like I was a part of a really good team in my pod. But then management changed and some people left to go to other mountains and pursue other experiences and things like that. And then it was kind of the sort of community for me sort of fell apart at that point. And the people that were part of that community, I still do keep in touch with, and I would consider them close friends. But I found it kind of harder to see the community. And then with the growth of the mountain town itself, it made it harder to see kind of community things going on for me, from my viewpoint. And that was part of what led me to leave Summit County and go to Salida, or as a smaller town with more kind of housing restrictions and things. So people can't do the Airbnb thing as easily. So it kind of restricts the growth a little bit, which means that there's like preservation of community that I see down in Salida a little bit more. And Monarch doesn't have the draw that the big resorts have. So it's a little bit more contained, a little bit deterrent to some of the growth that we've seen in Summit County. And so the community up there, I like it a little bit more. It's more, I think, people there are more focused on the skiing and the quality of the skiing and the snow sliding, either way. And so I've been enjoying that, or people are like just there because skiing and snowboarding is awesome, and less there to make a paycheck, and less there to be egotistical about things, and less there to be the most badass skier, but just to enjoy their skiing. And so I've been really enjoying that, but I don't have as good of a window in to what Monarch is like because it's my second season there.
Definitely. Yeah, it's really interesting hearing like that fine line really with resorts and how, where's that threshold point and where they become that local mountain to something that's really well known and famous and everyone's going to, and like your instance of saying it like becomes that Disneyland essentially.
And maybe a way that you could say to measure that was when you spend a lot of time skiing and snowboarding in the United States, if you spend any time on the East Coast, especially more like West Virginia, some of the smaller hills, or I imagine it would be the same in Michigan, Wisconsin, those kind of places, the amount of vertical of the ski hill itself is not very much. And the chairlifts are old and it takes a long time for them to take you up. So you get to this point where you're a good enough skier or rider that you spend more time sitting on the chairlift than you do skiing down the mountain. Then for me, it's like, well, that's one thing and that's fine. Like at Keystone, you get 2,800 vertical feet or something out of the first lift, something along those lines. I can't remember the exact statistic, but something fairly significant, 2,500 vertical feet. But it takes me less time still to get down than to go up. And it's like 7-minute, 8-minute, 10-minute chairlift rides on fast chairs, but still I'm faster down than up. But if I can get to the bottom and just cruise right into the lift line and get on the lift, then I don't care. But if I have to wait in a half an hour lift line, now I'm on the mountain for 8 hours and did 4 runs. And I'm like, it's Disneyland.
Yeah. It's quite funny actually seeing you ever see like the videos of just like, so there was like one in Vail Resorts a couple of months ago where it's just the lift line was just up. Yeah. So like where that like to like town, like the center of town is just it's ridiculous sometimes when you see those lines and you're like, there's no point in snowboarding or no point in skiing. Like, would you want to stay in that lift line for like 2-3 hours just to get one run in, and then it's literally by the end of the day or something like that? It gets really interesting in that way. Noah, what about you? I want to quickly touch upon your experiences with Breckenridge and any other kind of resorts as well.
Yeah, so my entire tenure in the industry has been at Breck. I've been, fairly content there. Yeah, there's some pros and cons, right, to every mountain, right? Monarch's great. There's no lines, and the snow stays in great condition because there's less traffic on it. But there's also, less higher end snowboarders, right? One of the great things about teaching at Breck is that you get to teach higher level snowboarders. So if you're working towards your Cert 2, Cert 3 and beyond, there's some opportunities for you to practice that skill set and, develop some clientele. So there's pros and cons to every resort. And I'll admit that Breck isn't my favorite mountain to ride all the time. My first season out here, I spent more of my days off going to Vail, right? Yeah, Breck Plan B, that's why the B's the logo. But I've had a positive experience living in the community and being close to Denver. I have family on the Front Range, which is about an hour and a half away. So for me, I was not as encouraged to go to other resorts as much, because part of the value in being in Breck for me is the proximity to my family. And there's lots of, it's a large school, right? It's a large resort. We're always, one of the number 1 or number 2 most visited ski resorts in the country. And so there's a lot of volume by design. That's because it's a volume-based resort in the school. There's definitely some trade-offs that come from it. Traffic kind of sucks. It's a large company. It's a large corporation. So learning to parking, right? It's big city problems, right? So it's just like how we choose to maybe live in a town or a city, right? There's those of us that like the country for country reasons, and there's those of us that like the city for city reasons. And it's kind of the same qualities exist in ski resorts as well. So I've had a positive experience. I love Breck as a base as well. We're essentially located in the Rocky Mountains, so it's easy for me to come down to Monarch for the day, or zip over to Copper and go ride at some other places. And it's also been nice having access to other resorts around the country. Going to Utah or even just Vail or Beaver Creek for a day. And it takes some navigation for sure. To not, you don't go out on a Saturday unless you're working, because it's going to be busy. Pick a midweek day, and it's definitely not as the access isn't on the surface as it might be with some other places. But it's been great, and I like to tell people I'm a snowboarder with a 401k. And that's awesome that I can be a professional snowboarder, and I do consider it professional snowboarding, right? We are athletes. At the end of the day, we're out there and using our bodies to make
risking it all.
Risking it all out there, to brave the few. So to that extent, like it's working for Breck and for Vail Resorts has afforded me some larger corporate opportunities that may not be present at some smaller places. The summertime I work for a small family-owned resort in the mountains of California, and there was a lot of great things. I knew my owners, I knew their kids, right? But there are also some other benefits that weren't there, some other things that weren't in place because it wasn't a large company, right? It was it probably had 100 employees. So there's pros and cons to each situation, and I think it's great. When I work with people, instructors at Breckenridge, and they tell me, "Hey, Noah, I gotta go. I can't find a place to live. The corporate environment's too much, right? I'm not getting enough soul time." I celebrate it. I think it's great. Awesome. Go check out another resort. Where are you going? That's awesome.
Right with me in Monarch.
Diversify experience, in the back of my head, I got somebody to stay with in X new place. But I think it's important for people to have that diversity of experiences and develop perspective from each of those experiences. James took a hiatus, right? Taught at Breck for a little bit, and then you kind of stepped out of the industry for a little bit to do some medical profession stuff. Yeah. And you're back.
And I'm back.
So I'm stoked that you're back. I'm more enthusiastic, excited about ever. And who knows, right? Maybe you wouldn't have had this enthusiasm about snowboard instruction education had you not taken stepped out for a minute.
Yes. I think that's absolutely true. So some of the things that I said about PSAA and AASI, or I guess Noah said it, but he referred to a conversation that we had last night about this, about how the organization is always seeking feedback and always trying to make the product that they offer better. When you're going through the process, that's one of the things that maybe I could say could potentially be changed in some fashion, is that while you're going through the process, you're at your Cert 1, your Cert 2, your Cert 3, it's much more challenging for you to be aware that they're trying to better what they're offering. And so it can be very frustrating because you're like, I feel that I was treated unfairly at this exam, something along those lines. And rather than, if you stick in the industry for as long as we have, I think you start to see that, yes, maybe that's true. However, that in and of itself was in the feedback loop for next year's material to be better. So if you stick around long enough, you realize that even though you were treated unfairly, that was part of the system of them learning to do a better job today, if that makes sense. And so to me, to see an organization that's actively trying to make what they're offering better is something rare. It's not something that I, as Noah said, I left and worked as an EMT and paramedic for several years, and went to part-time at the ski school, kind of seeking the 401k, right? The year-round employment, the more regular kind of income and whatnot. And I needed that at that time. I don't regret it, but I don't see myself going back to working on the ambulance because I don't see the desire to improve. I don't see it. I don't see it anywhere. Unfortunately, I find a hard time seeing that anywhere else besides in this industry, which is why I'm back, because that's something that's super important to me, to recognize your mistakes and your errors and strive to do better next time, right? That's what we ask of our students. Hey, that's okay. You fell down doing your one-footed J-turns. Let's get up and do it again until we're good at it, so we can go up the chairlift and do some more stuff. That's going to be awesome. And I don't see it anywhere else. And we were joking about leading clinics and having convergent versus divergent educational experience last night, right? And I felt like in EMS, it was a constantly divergent educational experience with no built-in feedback loop to close the learning cycle. So you have an experience, you run a call, you go to grandma's house to deal with whatever grandma's got going on, heart problem, who knows, but you never find out what actually happened and what the treatment course was. So you don't know that next time you go to some grandma's house who's having heart problem and looks like this with these signs and symptoms, that you'll know what's wrong, because you never learn to tie that back in. So it's just this constantly divergent experience that's hardly even education. And so it's so divergent and there's so little feedback that it's hard to even consider it education. So then it's like, well, how do I get better at this? Where in this industry, I'm like, great, I can tie it back in. Even if Noah can't tie it back in for me, I've gotten to a point in this industry where I can tie it back in for myself and create what I want out of it. And that's really meaningful to me, to have that kind of a thing in my life where I can create material and affect people's lives and enjoy it while I'm at it, not be stressed out listening to my hair turn gray.
And it's evident, it's going to like, the idea of it's helping, those future instructors as well, learn from those past kind of interactions, those past experiences, to really just overall help the association itself, but also, you're making even better instructors for the future. And it's super cool to see that. I kind of want to move on to the last question then, guys, before we kind of wrap up. In your opinion, in both your opinion, what makes a great snowboard instructor?
Kind of tying back into Noah and I's conversations from last night, I think people skills, first and foremost. I think that's what's most important to me. And I think within that, you could tuck in kind of anything you want into there almost. But I think that being able to recognize the needs of the person you're teaching and address them, right? we might not always know what that is. So kind of thinking on your feet and recognizing where you're going wrong so that you can get back on your feet and get moving in the right direction with someone. I think that means a lot more to me personally than some highly certified technical person, say like myself. I always say that if I had kids, I would bring them to the ski school to learn. I wouldn't teach them myself. And I would ask the ski school to give my kid the rookie instructor because I want them to be stoked on it. I think there's a higher probability that rookie is going to be like, this is awesome. I'm snowboarding. I'm teaching somebody else how to snowboard. Let's get you going, bud. This is going to be so fun. And keeping that stoke high and making sure that the kid is having a good time. That's people skills. And maybe the actual content of what they're teaching is weaker, maybe for lack of a better word. And then what someone like Noah or I might teach. And it might just be less technically founded. They might not have all the teaching skills and whatnot because they're new. And I don't care because what's important to me is the people skills of being able to relate, being able to connect. And so I think that's probably the primary thing that I consider in somebody being a really good snowboard instructor.
Sounds good. Noah, what do you think?
Yeah, kind of echoing James. Number one thing you can do is be stoked. Your passion for the sport and what we do on snow will serve you really well in connecting with guests. Our guests and our students, whoever we're talking with, will meet us halfway. When we set the tone with that enthusiasm for whatever it is about snowboarding that we love, it's going to make the learning process much easier, and it's going to make their enjoyment with you much more exciting, and compel them to return and enjoy the sport, right? Even beyond snowboarding, right? With anything that we're doing, if we look like if I'm cooking eggs on the stove back here and I've got a frown on my face, James is going to associate egg cooking with a terrible time, right? But if I'm just like having a blast cooking some eggs on the stove, like it's the best thing that's going to happen all day. Like James is going to change his opinion about eggs. He's going to think, maybe we can cook some eggs. Maybe that guy's having a good time cooking eggs. So that's kind of
make poached eggs.
I do. It's a pain in the ass. Poached eggs. Right. So that's the number one thing. And then, I think I had an interesting conversation with some instructors at Monarch yesterday. It was a mixed group of skiers and snowboarders. And at one point, there was this observation by one of the snowboard instructors about how we typically interact with each other. And there's a little bit different culture on the ski side than there is on the snowboard side. And I think we're fortunate on the snowboard side to enter into the sport with a willingness to learn from each other. I've described our culture as being somewhat tribal. We typically kind of stick together, and if I see James do a cool trick, I'm like, hey James, show me how to do that cool trick, right? And we from the beginning, right from the origins of our sport in the 80s and 90s, like we've had to learn from each other, and I think that social dynamic is still very much in place, even a generation later. And as we continue to develop our skill set and feel good about what we're doing and what we can do, I think being able to preserve that commitment to learning, even at the highest levels, will also serve us well in being great instructors. So never rest on your laurels, so to speak.
Oh, great, guys. Let's wrap this episode up. Is there anywhere, let's say listeners want to contact you guys, just to ask any questions on their end? Fire away if there's anywhere.
Plug yourselves in.
If there's anywhere where you guys want to plug yourselves in.
Well, I'm relatively easy to get a hold of through Facebook. So you can always copy me, like when you post this to Facebook, the podcast. Definitely tag me on there. And then also, if you get a hold of Monarch Ski and Ride School, I will be very easy to get a hold of through there because it's a small place.
Email's great. I like email. Noah.Hopkins, first name, last name, Noah.Hopkins, HOPKINS @gmail.com. Send me an email anytime. Happy to support.
Great. Thanks very much, guys. That's perfect.